Radio.
Oh, yes. Hello. Good day to you all. Here we are together once again on the radio. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in and listen to another episode of A Kind Voice on Good News. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Dean Buchanan. This is the show where all news is good news all of the time. A Kind Voice on Good News is a weekly radio program where we celebrate the good things that happen around the world, the things that sometimes get overlooked by the mainstream media. We interview the authors, professors, social entrepreneurs, and other game changers who have created positive movements and promoted kind activity in our world. By interviewing the originators of these movements like Pay It Forward, the Kindness Challenge, and the Heroic Imagination Project, you get the authentic stories firsthand. We also share stories about ordinary people doing great things. The hope is these stories will uplift and inspire you to move forward in your daily lives and do great things. A Kind Voice on Good News is part of a larger family of radio programs that includes books, music, innovation, sports, and movies. Our radio programs are part of a much bigger mission of A Kind Voice, though, which is to make our world a kinder, more connected place, one conversation, one kind deed, or one good story at a time. We have a great show lined up for you today. As promised last week, I talked to you about having Miss Laura Schroff on the show today, author of An Invisible Thread, great book about her true life story of helping a homeless boy when he was on the streets of New York City and how they still have a relationship over 25 years later. Great book, great author, great story. Don't miss it. She's up right after the first break. On with the show really quickly, though. I want to report one story that I specifically held out from last week because we are a good news show, and I report good news. But I did hold this out, and because it fits so well with this week, I wanted to give it to you and let it resonate a little bit with you because of the story with Laura as well. It was called When I Hugged a Homeless Person. I spent most of my early adult life looking through them. I was busy. I was working. I was raising a family and running errands. I had things to do. If you didn't look at them, they weren't there, right? You know, those bedraggled-looking people on the corner with a sign in their hand. I only wanted the light to turn green fast enough so that I wouldn't have to keep pretending not to see them. Anybody relate to that? They were mostly invisible to me. I refused to see them, and that's how I wanted it, because I just didn't have the time. Then one day, as I was holding the hand of my best friend, who was way too young to be dying of breast cancer, she told me that she made every moment count by slowing down, by being in the moment, and by seeing everything. I held her hand for 5 years, and then she passed away. This isn't a story about cancer, so please forgive me. But she did teach me something. It took a while for her message to really sink in. I can be a soul learner. I started by seeing everything. At first, that was great. I saw the flowers and the sun and the clouds and puppies and rainbows. Then I saw them. You know, the people on the corner with the signs made me uncomfortable to see them. And I had to ask myself, why? After a while, I realized that my apathy toward the homeless was what made me uncomfortable. Then I thought, what if I traded my apathy for empathy? Would that really be so bad? The next homeless person I saw was a Vietnam veteran, according to his sign. I parked my car and got out. I went up to him and told him he mattered. I asked him what would make his day. A hot cup of coffee, he told me. So we walked across the street to a little diner, and I bought him a cup of coffee. a stack of pancakes, some eggs, bacon, and hash browns on the side. He talked, I listened. He talked, and I was the one blessed by his presence. I told him how I used to look through people like him. But that day, I decided to open my eyes and to really see the world. I told him he was the first homeless person I had ever spoken to. After our meal together, I asked him if there was anything else that would make his life a bit easier. He said the only other thing he wanted was to get enough extra money that day to buy a new pair of socks. Socks? Really? He said he'd been wearing the same pair for a few weeks. A simple luxury that I take for granted. There are always clean socks in my dresser drawer. I actually happen to be wearing an exceptionally nice pair of wool blend hiking socks at that very moment. I told him that I wanted to give him the pair I was wearing if he would accept them. I had only been wearing them a few hours. At first, my new friend refused. I told him it would make me happy if he would take them. Finally, he agreed. We sat down on a bench, and he proceeded to first take off his boots, then peel the black socks that had once been white off of his feet. I think a layer or two of skin might have come off with them. As I took my expensive hiking boots and socks off, I was a bit embarrassed by the luxury that I took for granted. I then quickly stuck my bare feet back into my boots, assuring my friend that I had many fine pair of socks at home. As my friend took his new pair of socks, he held the socks up to his cheeks and said they were warm and smelled as good as me. Goodness, my cheeks must have flushed. Then he slipped them on, remarking, "These are the nicest socks I've had in a long time." We shared a hug. I made sure to hold the hug a few extra seconds so that my friend would know he did matter to me. When I pulled back, pools of tears welled up in his eyes. I don't know how I held it together, but I did, at least until I made it back to my car. Socks. Such a simple luxury I used to take for granted. Now I always have an extra pair with me in my car. They're always my best pair, just waiting to be given away. Stick around. We're going to take a real short break, and when we come back, we're going to have Laura Schroff, author of An Invisible Thread. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
There's nothing wrong with reaching out when you need. I'll be there for you, and maybe you can be for me. With a kind voice, a few kind words, an open ear for when you need to be heard, a warm heart. We can make that choice to be a kind voice, a few kind words.
Hi, my name is Azim Kamisa. In January of 1995, while delivering pizzas to help him through college, my son Tariq was senselessly murdered by a 14-year-old gang member. Tariq was a wonderful young man who could light up the room with a joke. In the search to relieve my pain, I needed to find a way to use the sadness from this tragedy to help others. So by the end of 1995, after months of agonizing pain and introspection, I chose to start an organization to help stop kids from killing kids. And I reached out in forgiveness to the killer's grandfather and guardian in brotherhood. We have worked together, speaking to over 1 million youth and adults all over the world in bringing the lessons of peace and nonviolence for 20 continuous years. Now I'm asking you to add your kind voice to our efforts. For a peaceful world, we all need to embrace peace and forgiveness. We need you as a peacemaker, having forgiven the past, any enemies, and at last having forgiven yourself for any wrongdoing. To learn more, go to my website, azimkamisa.com. There you'll find my story in a trilogy of books, From Murder to Forgiveness, followed by From Forgiveness to Fulfillment, followed by From Fulfillment to Peace. as well as a download for a free guided meditation dedicated to your peace. Again, the website is azimkamisa.com, which is azimkamisa.com. It is indeed time for peace.
On the radio with a kind voice.
Oh, thank you so much for tuning in, and welcome back. You're listening to A Kind Voice on Good News. I'm your host, Dean Buchanan. In 2007, Laura Schroff took an early retirement from Time Incorporated, ending a highly successful career as an advertising executive. Born and raised on Long Island, Laura was part of the advertising team that made USA Today a successful national newspaper. Before helping launch 3 of the most successful startups in Time Inc.'s history, InStyle, Teen People, and People Style Watch, she was also the New York division manager at People magazine. Laura has also been the New York ad manager at Miss Magazine and associate publisher at Brides. The time away from her career allowed her to seriously contemplate doing something she'd never done before, write a book. She soon began working on a book with her co-author, Alex Tresniowski, on a book about a relationship she developed more than 20 years prior with an 11-year-old panhandler on the streets of New York City that proved to be life-changing for both. Sure enough, in November 2011, An Invisible Thread hit the shelves and became a New York Times national bestseller. Here to speak with us more about this wonderful story is Miss Laura Schroff. Laura, welcome to the show.
Well, Dean, thank you so much. That story, really, took my breath away. I can't believe it. It was absolutely beautiful.
Oh, my goodness.
And thank you for holding on to it and sharing it this week with my interview. What an incredible story, and so many different messages in it.
Oh, there sure were, and I thought it was a good fit, and I was hoping, hoped that you wanted to, you wouldn't mind having it, and it wouldn't over or undershadow, and I thought it was a good fit. I'm glad it was. Thank you.
It was an amazing fit. Thank you so much, and it was really unbelievably beautiful.
I was really happy to see that. I love seeing stories like that, because how true is that when, you did the same thing in New York before you met Maurice. You walked by him every day, not him, but them, or homeless, and the same thing with Maurice until that day. You even walked by him, and then you turned around.
Yeah. I actually did turn around. In fact, when he said to me, "Excuse me, lady, do you have any spare change? I'm hungry," my original reaction was to say no, and I did. And I walked towards Broadway, and all of a sudden something just made me stop. And I have to honestly say, probably the words that resonated with me were the words, "I'm hungry." And he was just a boy. He was only 11 years old at the time. And that's why I turned back and I went back, and very much like the man in your story, I did not want to give him money, but offered to take him over to McDonald's and get him something to eat. And we never could have imagined that one simple lunch that was just really pocket change would have such an impact. And it would not only change my life, but Maurice's, and one day have such a ripple effect that it would change the lives of his children too.
And not to mention now how many other people in the world. It's amazing. Your book's in 7 languages now, or I think it's 7.
It actually is 11. It's actually in 11 because we don't have all the books up yet, because we're still waiting to get a couple more that are still in the process. Yeah, but it's in 11 languages, which is really absolutely unbelievable to me.
Oh. And so you had the lunch with this kid, and you start having the regular lunch, but you still didn't know a lot about his life. You didn't really want to pry into it. You didn't know a lot about his mom, and he even shielded you from that. That was another amazing part. We can get into a little later, but you kept having these. But you guys, you lived a couple blocks apart. You soon found out, and you were in 2 completely different worlds. You actually kind of spoke 2 different languages. On that first day, he looked at you like, "What are you talking about, lady?" when you tried to tell him what you did.
Yeah, I lived on 56th Street, West 56th Street, and he lived only 2 blocks apart. We lived 2 blocks apart. He lived on 54th at the Bryan Hotel, which was back in 1986 probably one of the most dangerous shelter hotels in all of New York City. And he lived in a room that was 12 by 12 that had only 2 beds, no bedding, pillows, or blankets, In one corner sat a chair, and on the opposite side was a half of a refrigerator and a television that sat on top. You know, as a child, Maurice could never remember food in the fridge, just water and baking soda for the adults to cook the drugs at night. And he lived in that room with as many as 11 people in that small little room.
Yeah, a couple blocks away from you, and a totally different world. He had no clue when I remember the first thing I was thinking about was, you're telling him what you do during the day, and he says, really? Every day? He didn't understand what a schedule was, really, because he doesn't even really have a concept of time.
No, I was actually the first person that he met that ever worked, and he didn't even really understand the whole concept that you would get up every single day and go to work. And you didn't call in sick, and you just didn't decide not to, and you got there on time. I mean, imagine living in a room where there was no clock, so he had no sense of time ever, which was really hard. I mean, so how do you expect a child to get up and go to school if there isn't even an alarm clock to wake them up and get them off to school?
That is just amazing. It's something that we walk by every day and we don't even notice it and we don't see it. We don't realize it, but it's there.
Well, it's so interesting because that other man in his beautiful story, talked about how so many of these people really are treated as if they are really invisible, that you just kind of walk by them and you almost make a conscious effort of making sure that you don't look at them. So they do feel kind of invisible, that they're part of the landscape of the sidewalk.
Yeah, and I wonder why that is. And I've been guilty of that too, because you don't know what to do. You know the light's going to turn or whatever. You don't. I guess you're frozen in time for a fraction of a second. Oh, now it's green. I got to go. I know what to do next time. You got to get out of your comfort zone and do it. I mean, there are people and there's a reply that you're going to get. What amazed me with Maurice was, and with a lot of stories I hear with this, is he was so quick to grab onto that basic need for that connection, that human connection. And that's what came out, and we were talking about before the show, all of a sudden with the brown bag lunch versus the money, with the table. All of a sudden, the big things that were really important to him were not the same things that are important to everyday kids, like the big toys and things. He wanted the connection. He wanted the family. He wanted the things that he didn't have, was the support and the love. And
what's so interesting, he wanted these things because he saw them on television. That was really his frame of reference. Certainly it wasn't the way that he lived or what he felt that he lacked at home, because he didn't know any differently. But it was what he used to see on television that used to make him see that there was maybe a different way that people lived. He just, in his world, he wasn't aware of it. So it was really what he did see on TV that made him think that different things do take place. But he didn't really know because he had nothing to compare it to. This was his life, and he basically didn't even realize how dysfunctional his life was until he met me.
Yeah, and then it came out, and how quickly you guys created a bond, because I noticed, 4 weeks, roughly, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks into it when you went and met his teacher? Was that about it?
No, it was about 5 weeks.
Few months?
It was a few months, but it was about 5 weeks that we continued to meet on Monday nights for dinner. Mm-hmm. And on the 5th Monday night, I actually invited him to my apartment because I thought it would be nice to have a home-cooked meal for him. And Maurice, unbeknownst to me, was actually really frightened to come to my apartment, and he actually came prepared with a box cutter in his pocket because he didn't really understand why I was being nice to him. And he was sure that, in a sense, that my kindness was coming at a price, and he was positive that this was the night that he was going to find out what I really, really wanted from him. And when I sat him down told him to sit down on the couch, that I wanted to have a serious conversation with him, he kind of looked at me, and I said to him, the reason why I said I've invited you to my home is because I consider you a friend. I said, and you need to understand that friendship is built on trust. I said, but I want you to know that if anything is ever missing from my apartment, we will no longer be friends. And he looked at me with a very puzzled expression on his face, and I said to him, do you understand what I'm saying? He said, I think so. He said, I think you just want to be my friend, that's it? And I said, well, yeah. I said, of course. And he kind of looked at me, and he stood up, and he put his hand out, and he said to me, Miss Laura, he said, a deal is a deal. And that night was the night that we actually solidified our friendship on a bond of trust that would continue to grow over a quarter of a century. But originally, he really thought that I absolutely wanted something from him, that I couldn't just be doing this because I thought he seemed like a really good kid.
And you were just a kind person reaching out. Yeah.
It wasn't really probably until maybe a couple of months later that I actually went and met with his teacher, Ms. Kim House, who was really a wonderful teacher and who really cared about him a lot and knew his situation was pretty difficult and pretty tough.
Yeah, I brought that up because I was really impressed with, on the show we talk about a lot about the human connection and the good deeds and things, and I love the human connection. And when you talked about you three were in there and she wanted him to leave the room, and he got a little bit scared.
Because he was afraid of what she was going to tell him.
Exactly. And you looked at him, and you guys had an unspoken trust. You looked at him, you put your hand on his shoulder, and that calmed him down, and he basically smiled, or he was okay, and he left the room. He thought, okay, everything's going to be okay. You didn't have to say anything to him, and you've known him for a few months.
Yeah. It's what I've said about the book from the very beginning is I really do feel like my stars have been aligned. I absolutely feel enormously blessed. But I think that there have been things that have happened throughout this entire process that have really been truly amazing. And I do talk a lot about how, my mother, who unfortunately passed away at the very young age of 47 when I was only 25 years old, I talk about how she's always been high in the sky looking over me from that very special place we call heaven. And I truly believe it. I believe that she's been by my side every step of the way. After the book got sold, and we were really now working on the book. I mean, I had originally written about 175 pages, and then when Alex agreed to help me with the book, we were going to work on the rest of it together. And I had said to Maurice that I really wanted to make sure that Ms. House had a proper part in the book, and, Alex really wanted to interview her. And so Maurice went to the school and was basically told that she had retired. And 2 weeks later, Maurice's daughter, Princess, who was 14 at the time, was in homeroom. And this substitute teacher said to her, "Oh, Mazak, by any chance are you related to Maurice Mazak?" And so Princess said, "Well, yeah, that's my dad." And she said, "Oh, my God." She said, "When he was a little boy, I was his teacher." And she said, "Oh." And then Ms. House said, this substitute teacher said, and he was really good friends with this lady. And Princess said, "Oh, you mean my Aunt Lori?" And Ms. House, the substitute teacher, said, "Are you kidding? They're still in touch?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, they're absolutely in touch. In fact, they're writing a book." And Ms. House said, "Oh, my God, I would love to talk to your dad. Would you do me a favor? Would you have your dad call me?" And so we ended up getting her telephone number.
That's great how those things
in a way where she just handed it to him. And I had spent one Saturday calling every Ms. Kim House in the New York area and came up with nothing. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, here we were with her telephone number in his hand that she handed to him. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah, here you go. Yeah, that's great how those work out. I love that. Oh boy, I'll tell you, you don't. You say in your book you don't think a lot about the sport, but you did hit a home run with this one. I'll tell you what. And one of your happiest moments, you say in the book, was doing that. But it didn't mean much to you, but it was your happiest moment, and that was the Mets game. You took him to a Mets game. How soon into the relationship was that?
That had to have been sometime, really, I would say in October, because baseball was going to be starting to wind down. But I worked at USA Today, and, of course, we had these unbelievable seats. And Maurice had never, ever been to a baseball game. And I just thought it would be great. So my boss, Valerie Salambier, who actually wrote the foreword for the book, actually let me use 2 of the tickets that we normally would use for clients. And I took him to a baseball game. I actually had given Maurice a note and said to him he needed to have his mother sign this note because I didn't want to take him in my car without her permission. And so I gave him this note and said, your mom's got to sign this note. And when he didn't show up, I ended up going to the Bryan Hotel with a friend, my friend Lisa. And when we got there, I was like, wow, this place is really something else. I mean, I had never, ever been in a place like the Bryan Hotel. And one of the guards actually took us upstairs to his room. And this was really the only time that I ever met his mother and I met his Grandma Rose. But his mother answered the door, and when she answered the door, I had never, ever seen anyone so strung out on drugs. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable to me. And she finally walked away, and Grandma Rose came to the door, and I just said, hi, my name is Laura Schroff, and I'm a friend of Maurice's, and I would like to take him to a baseball game, but I have to take him in my car, and I was hoping that you would sign this permission slip for me. And so I kind of handed her the note with a pen, and I had really the chance to look into the room, and that's the only time I ever saw the room. And she finally signed the note, and the next thing I knew, she slammed the door on my face. And Maurice was horrified that I had gone to his room and was really upset and made me promise that I would never, ever go back to that room. What he said, which was very cute, is nice white ladies like me should never, ever be in a place so dangerous. And I promised him that I would never, ever go back there. But I know that he was also embarrassed that I did see where he was living and how he was living.
Do you think it was more for embarrassment, or was it really for safety?
I think it was a mixture of both. I think it was really a mixture of both. But he was always extremely protective of me because he had a couple of uncles who were drug addicts and drug dealers. And again, because we lived only 2 blocks apart, he was always very protective of me and did not want me ever to meet his family or anyone in his even outer circle because he was so protective. But he used to tell me all the time that he had my back, which was really very, very cute and very protective.
Cute. Well, yeah, and that kind of answers my question of I wondered why he did protect you. He was careful to keep your worlds apart to the point of lying. You'd say, how are things going? He never told you later in the book about losing the apartment with his mom going to jail and those types of things. And, how easy it would have been just to say, oh, gee, Laura, we lost the apartment or whatever. But yeah, I'm starting to understand now that, yes, he did want to kind of shield you from that, not let you get involved, because had you got involved, then, it would have been a different situation for you. Okay, hey, we're coming up on a break. If you can stick around a little bit, we'll take a quick break and come back. I want to talk about you a little bit. How's that?
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll stick around. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hi, this is Corey from Runa. And at Runa, we make a number of different beverages, all from one leaf called guayusa. Guayusa is a naturally caffeinated leaf from the Ecuadorian Amazon. Indigenous peoples in that area have been brewing and drinking it like tea for thousands of years. All the guayusa that we sell is certified organic, fair trade, and non-GMO. And because guayusa is naturally packed with caffeine and antioxidants, it gives you this really nice, clear-headed, clean, and focused energy. We think of ourselves as a lifestyle brand because guayusa fuels you in doing whatever it is in your life that you need or love to do. So if it's one of those days where you need to sit at your desk for 8 hours and pound out some project or report, then guayusa is perfect for fueling you and doing that work. Alternatively, if it's a beautiful day out and you're going to do yoga in the park or you're going for a bike ride in the woods, then guayusa is perfect for fueling that as well. It gives you this amazing, full-body, wholesome energy and helps you feel fully alive. And that's why we call our company Runa. Runa is a Quechua word that actually means fully alive or fully living human being. We're sold in natural, organic food stores across the country. We're also in Whole Foods nationwide, and you can always find a store near you on our website with our store locator at runa.org. Go out to a store near you, grab a box or a bottle or a can, and crack one open and try one today.
Kind Voice Radio.
Okay, hey, welcome back. You're listening to Kind Voice Radio. This is A Kind Voice on Good News. I'm your host, Dean Buchanan. We have with us today Ms. Laura Schroff. author of An Invisible Thread. She's with us talking about her book, and before the break, we were talking about the book, and now I'd like to ask a few questions. Actually, Laura, I'm glad the back of the book has some of the standard questions in it. I love the discussion or the interview with Laura Schroff in the back. I was glad to see that, because now people can go out and buy the book, and they can hear the standard interview questions, and I want to ask you a couple of different questions.
Okay, great. Okay.
Just spin-offs, really, from those.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
You did I was really impressed. I loved to see it or hear it in the book. You exposed a lot about your childhood and your personal family life in this book growing up, which I'm sure was, a little bit difficult at times to live through again. However, was the process of writing this book somewhat therapeutic? I know you mentioned it in your answers, but you didn't quite go into that. But did that feel a little bit better for you now, or did that help any, or what do you think about that?
Well, when I started to write the book, my original outline, it never even dawned on me that I would include my childhood. So my original outline has none of my childhood. And it really wasn't until I was doing the baseball chapter where I was taking Maurice to the baseball game. And I was thinking about how excited he was and how big a deal it was for him to go see a real baseball game. And all of a sudden that night, I started to think about my brother Frank and how much he loved baseball and how much his mitt meant to him. And then before I knew it, I was thinking about the terrible fight that my father had that evening, because my brother had been playing. At the time, I think he was 6 years old. I mean, I have this specific, it's in the book, but 6 years old. He had been playing with one of his tape measures and had broken it by mistake, and my father came home drunk, and unfortunately my mother was at work, and in a fit of anger, he ripped up his mitt. Remembered that like it was yesterday.
Yeah,
and before and before I knew it, I started writing the mitt story. And then before I knew it, I was kind of going back and forth between my relationship with Maurice and my own childhood. There were some parts that were somewhat therapeutic, but I can tell you there were others that really made me sick, like the snowstorm, driving in the snowstorm. I mean, that was really a nightmare. And I remember in the middle of it, I actually had to just stop, and I thought, I just need to go to bed. I need to go to bed and go to sleep. Because, at this point, when I started working on the book, I was in my 50s. I mean, I had long kind of put aside the things that happened in my childhood. And, I have to say that I honestly believe with all my heart that my father loved us and he loved my mother very much. And when my father was good, he was great. And when my father was terrible, he was terrible. When he drank, his darkest, ugliest demons would come out. And I kind of came to terms with that. But I also, having met Maurice and having spent so much time with Maurice, he was a child who actually helped me appreciate the childhood that I did have. As a child, I never had to worry about a warm bed to sleep in. I never had to ever think that I was not going to have breakfast, lunch, or dinner. My father would have worked 10 jobs to make sure there was enough food on the table for his family. So although I had a very difficult childhood from the standpoint that our life was very chaotic, we never knew when he was going to drink, we never knew when he'd become violent with my mother, become violent with my poor younger brother Frank, but there were certain things that were we still had a lot of blessings in our lives. I mean, it was still a very warm and loving family. And if anything, when people talk about how I gave so much to Maurice, the truth is Maurice gave so much to me. He really helped me appreciate the childhood that I did have. So by the time I was writing those chapters, I had really kind of come to terms with it, and I was really much more at peace with it because I looked at my childhood in a very different light than I had long before I met Maurice.
Right. Well, I appreciate that you put all that in there, because I can tell you, at least from this reader's perspective, I truly believe that had you not put that level of detail and that level of because to me it was a perspective issue, and I don't think that the book would have really grabbed me as much, because I really do believe that there's a similar thread between all of that, and I do believe that tragedies and dysfunction comes in different flavors and shapes and sizes. You know, both of you only knew one thing when you were growing up. You didn't know each other's tragedies, and you didn't know each other's realities. So I felt fortunate to be able to read both of yours, and,
well, thank you.
I appreciate the fact that you put that in there.
But it was
it
hard. I mean, I have to say, you know, it was not easy, and it wasn't easy for Maurice either, because when we were doing the book, he was a grown man, and again, too, he had kind of put his childhood behind him, and even for his children never even knew about his childhood. But I do believe that it was important from the standpoint of giving the readers a little bit of a perspective of where I was coming from as well. My sister Annette was really fine with it, and so was my brother Stephen. But my sister Nancy in the beginning did have a little bit of a hard time, and I told her that I understood. I said, you know what? You know, it's hard to, you know, have people know that your childhood wasn't such a great childhood. But as I tried to make my sister Nancy understand, it wasn't anything that we did, nor was it anything that we should really be ashamed of.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you mentioned in there, unless I missed where you say you got it from, but I tried to key a couple of things. A question came up. You mentioned you were one that ended up with confidence in your family, not sure where you got it from. Well, when you were 16 and you the point where you stood up to your father that time and protected your mother, what was that like? Do you think that's where you got a little confidence that day? Do you remember that?
I remember that day like it was like yesterday.
I bet you do.
And it's funny because even when I was really young and my parents would have these terrible fights, my sister Annette would always say, Lori, go break it up. And for some reason, I would always do it. And I don't know where I got my confidence from. I think in some ways my father was a really confident man. And there are a lot of times I'll do certain things. The other night, I was with some friends and I was snapping my finger to the beat of the music. And I said to my friends Sue and John, I said, it's so crazy. I said, but I recently realized that whenever my father listened to music, he would snap his finger. And I think that I did take away a lot of my father's really good traits because he had many. But I don't really know where I got the confidence. For some reason, I don't know if it was confidence or it was just a drive, a willing to not accept things the way they were. I mean, I remember that day with my father. I just couldn't believe when I came into the room, you know, what I saw. And I was 16 years old. I was old enough to stand up to him. And he was shocked. He was shocked by it. And I made it really clear to him if he ever touched her again, I would call the cops and I would absolutely make sure he got arrested. But I don't know if it was confidence or just this, it's hard to put my finger on it.
Well, it made you feel a little bit. I would assume that you had some sort of confidence.
I wasn't a pushover, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, you know, I had all these other things, a couple more things I wanted to talk about with you, and that we'll hit a break. We'll come back, I have a million questions. We could talk for the next couple hours and have a great time with it. But, you know, there's something that really also caught my eye in there was early in your career or at the very beginning with the airline, and you had the typing test.
Oh, right.
Yeah. We're just going to go over it here for a minute, but it was really, really something that, you know, you had the typing test, you took the first one, you failed. You asked for the second one, you failed. Well, you know, these are the kinds of things that I like because, you know, you're out of the mold. And this is back to the human connection thing that I always talk about, is you got a chance to make that human connection and get out of the mold that so many people are kind of thinking they got to get stuck into. Well, I got to get my degree. I got to get this. I got to get that. I got to fill out this. I got to get that certification. And then if I got to pass this and go on, and I got to get my resume in and do all these things. But for crying out loud, if you could just get in front of the people and show them who you are, and you say, oh, I was a little quirky, I was a little this, but they liked me, and I got the job as what I believe a receptionist is what they put you in. You failed the test twice, but they liked you.
And then I asked her if I could take a walk around the block, and could I please come back and take it again? And that's when I failed it again. And I think that she did see my tenacity. I really wanted the job, and that's when she actually offered me the job as a receptionist. And I was thrilled.
Yeah.
But I was determined to get that job. I mean, I wanted to work for an airline. I wanted to travel, and I really kind of hoped that I'd be able to see even a glimpse of the world. But she was a woman who had a heart. She could tell I really, really wanted that job. Had it been a different kind of person, she would have said, I'm sorry, you failed this test 3 times or 2 times, whatever it was, and it definitely was 2 times, and you're done. But she felt bad for me because she could tell I really wanted that job. She had a heart. She gave me a break.
Right. You made the connection. And I apologize for stealing the whole story. I gave away the punchline and everything. But
yeah, but we made this human connection.
Right. She didn't do I'm sorry, you don't conform to the standard, see you later. Just the actual one-line answer. I really liked that. I had to make note of that. And
did you also, I'm just curious, about how I got the job in advertising at Travel Agent Magazine, and I cut my finger.
With the cut on your finger, yeah. And you talked about your mother, and yes, I did like that.
That was also amazing. And that was another human connection, because he was really surprised that I would show up for an interview that was at 7:30, and I got there at 7:15, and when he asked me what happened to my finger, and I told him I cut it the night before, and he asked me if I needed to get stitches, and I said, yeah, I had to get 8. And he looked at his clock, and he said, I'm impressed. This is a highly competitive business, and punctuality is really important. That was a human connection. And I remember saying to him, I promise you, all I'm looking for is just 1 break. I said, and if you hire me, you're not going to be sorry. If you think you can work hard, I can work harder. I don't want 2 breaks. I want just 1. And I got the job. I mean, I didn't get it that day. I had to call a couple days later, and he asked me to come back in again. And I did, and that's when I told him, that if he thought he could work hard, I could work harder.
And look at that. And that still holds true today, I believe. I mean, it's more competitive, more people, less jobs, or whatever you want to say. But I still truly believe we need to teach that human connection, the good deeds, all the things that we're talking about, that still holds true and is successful today.
But I also have to really, truly believe that cutting my finger is what set me apart from the other candidates. I really do.
We won't promote that part.
But it did, because he was impressed that even though my interview was at 7:30, I got there at 7:15. And I'd spent half the night at in the emergency room getting my finger stitched.
Yeah. No, that very impressive. Same as the other job. You're exactly right. I love those 2 stories. Okay, so we got one more break to take. We'll come back and spend the last few minutes of the hour talking a few more things about your book. And
that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Give it a wrap. All right. Well, don't go away. We'll be right back with Laura Schroff.
This is NASCAR driver Kurt Busch, and I am proud to support our nation's veterans. Do you know you can get a faster decision on your disability compensation claims by filing an electronic fully developed claim, or e-claim, on eBenefits? Take it from a guy who lives his life in the fast lane. Faster is better. Visit ebenefits.va.gov today to learn more.
Hi, I'm Claire Bloom, and I started End 68 Hours of Hunger to put bags of food in the hands of local children who have little or nothing to eat for the 68 hours between the free lunch they get in school on Friday and the free breakfast they get in school on Monday. Our vision is to end childhood hunger in America one school at a time, and that's how we operate. We start programs wherever we have 2 volunteers in a community who are prepared to step up and take responsibility for running the program, and we grow from there. Today, we're feeding 900 children each weekend in 29 communities, and we're growing. If you're interested in starting a program in your community, please visit our website at www.end68hoursofhunger.org and click on the tab at the top of the page that says FAQ. Everything you need to know about starting a program is there, including videos on how to talk with groups, how to set up your space, and even what kind of food to include in the bags. Feel free to reach out to me at n68hoursofhunger@gmail.com.
A lot has changed from when Nola Osh started school until the time she finished.
When I received my diploma, it was a big to-do.
At 95 years young, Nola became the world's oldest college graduate.
If we don't concentrate on our ages, we go ahead and do things as if we were younger.
So no matter how old you are, live life and pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at Values.com.
Kind Voice Radio.
Okay, hey, welcome back. You're listening to Kind Voice Radio. This is Kind Voice on Good News. I am your host, Dean Buchanan, and we have with us today Miss Laura Schroff, author of An Invisible Thread. And we've been talking a lot about the book, about her personal life that's in the book, all over the board. We're having a great discussion. And before we go, Laura, we have a few minutes left. We have 5-10 minutes. I did want to get into a couple of things that you do have on your website. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about your current efforts with the Schools Initiative. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, what you're currently doing and how that's going?
Thank you. Yes. When the book came out, I never could have imagined that schools would actually embrace the book the way that they are. And what's really incredible is that the book is really hitting students of all different grades. I've met with students as young as first grade where the teachers have read certain parts of the book to them, all the way up through colleges where actually even Holy Cross made it required reading for their freshmen. And that's something that I really, really love. I love meeting with students. I was just a couple of weeks ago at the Frisk School in Paramus, New Jersey, and they did, for the second year, their 26 Acts of Kindness Day, and they actually included an Invisible Thread Acts of Kindness pledge. And that was just an amazing day. But the schools is something that is really amazing because students are really, really being inspired by the book. And, what we talk about a lot is what they think is a small act of kindness. And, what a small act of kindness might be to an adult, like this man giving his socks to this homeless man, a small act of kindness for a young child could be something as simple as sharing your lunch snack or inviting another student over to join you with your friends because that person is sitting by themselves. And we visited a school in Ohio a couple of months ago, and the cafeteria staff wanted to know what had happened that day because they had never heard so many pleases and thank yous. So it's really been amazing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love it. It's just amazing, and I never ever could have imagined it. And I feel so enormously blessed.
Yeah, that is impressive, and what an honor. Are you continuing to go? You have engagements booked? I noticed on your website.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got so many engagements coming up. In fact, I'm doing a school this week, and it's my first time of Skyping because I'm not big on Skyping, but I had gotten the most beautiful email from a teacher in Hawaii, and her class, her 5th grade class, was reading the book. And the email was so touching that I called information, and I called the school, and I actually spoke to the teacher, and the teacher couldn't believe I was calling. I'm like, are you kidding? You wrote me the most beautiful email. I said, I just couldn't get over it. And so we agreed that since I couldn't fly to Hawaii, that at the very least I could, we would Skype, so we're actually doing that this week. But I was at the Curtis School a couple of weeks ago, and I was also at the John Bounds School. I guess that was maybe not last week, but the week before. And I'm doing a Jericho High School this week at Cafe 126 on Friday night. So I've got quite a few schools coming up over the next few weeks, which is just amazing. I love meeting with students, and I'm always so incredibly touched by how they are responding to the book. And for children,
kids are hungry for information.
I guess if you'd say, what would be your dream? My dream would be that along with math and social studies, and they would teach a course on kindness. People kind of have forgotten that, there's some simple steps to being kind. I mean, it's so easy, but I don't think we can ever lose touch with the fact that sometimes people need to be reminded. I say to Maurice all the time, and just like with that beautiful story, if we all are just willing to open our eyes and our hearts to our surroundings, you never know what blessings you're going to see. And, Maurice was as much a blessing to me as I was to him. That's for sure.
Sure.
And I think about it a lot, like what would have happened to my life and how would my life have been so different if I had not, because Maurice became like a son that I never had. He taught me so many things. He taught me the true definition of lunch in a brown paper bag. Everyone loves that story of how, when I found out that he wasn't eating every day, that I could either give him money or if he wanted, I would make him lunch. And when he looked at me and he said to me, "I don't want your money, Miss Laura. I'd prefer my lunch in a brown paper bag." I'm like, "Well, why?" And he said, "Because when kids come to school and they have their lunch in a brown paper bag, that means someone cares about them." I was just on Friday night at the Williston Park Public Library, and someone had attended, a woman who was at the event said to me, "I make my lunch for my children every day." She said, "And I've always viewed it as such a hassle." She said, "I make their lunch now, and it makes me smile. And I've told my children, 9 and 11, why this lunch in a brown paper bag is so important." The bag is only brown paper. What you put inside it is love.
Exactly.
And it's so simple, and yet it has such an impact, particularly for children who are on the sidelines, looking in from the outside. Who would have ever thought that lunch in a brown paper bag could be so precious? But it really is to those who don't have someone at home packing that lunch for them.
Especially versus change for a panhandler.
Right.
Really, money.
Right.
That says a lot.
Yeah, he wanted the lunch over money.
Yeah, that tugs on your heart right there. I'll tell you.
Kids at schools love that story. But I have to say that probably is one of the most impactful stories in the book. And I have to say I still can remember that incident that day, and I was blown away by it. I remember just being like, oh my God, I can't even believe it. I was teaching Maurice simple things like how to use a fork and knife, how to blow his nose. He'd never had an adult ever put a tissue up to his nose and said blow. But he was teaching me things that were so simple. I used to say to my friends all the time, if we could walk in Maurice's shoe steps for 24 hours, just 24, we would never complain about our lives again.
You're exactly right. Yeah, that's amazing, and your book is full of that, and I wish I could bring all of that stuff out because I really wanted to get to the table a little bit. I love that at Annette's house. Actually, I do want to bring that out. It's okay. Yeah, we can make time. You take him out to your sister's. You got this huge house. You got the yard. You got the toys, the kids, and what do you think when on the way home you say, "What was your favorite part?" And he says, "The dining room table." You're like, what?
He didn't even, what he said, is that room. And I'm like, what room? He said, that room with that big table. And I said, oh, that's called a dining room. And he said, oh. I said, why did you like that room? He said, Miss Laura, he said, someday, when I grow up, I'm going to have a table just like that. And I later found out that he just couldn't believe how there was so much love that was passed across the table. He had never seen a family interact and talk and laugh and eat at the same time. And going for a bike ride, playing on the swings, all of the video games that they were playing with, dinner in that room was the room that stayed with him. And that was the first time I realized driving home that Maurice was starting to dream. Because up until that point, I used to say to him, what do you want to do when you grow up? I don't know. What do you want to be? I don't know. And that was the first time that I realized, wow, I think I'm making a difference. Because he looked at me and he said to me, someday when I grow up, I'm going to have a room just like that. And when you go into Maurice's cramped apartment, he does not have a living room. He has a dining room. And that's where his family hangs out.
At a big table.
At a big dining room table. His wife and his children. Yep.
Yep.
But they don't have a living room.
Big connection.
And it's and in the dining room, which is the living room, is where the TV is. That's where the computer is. But that's where they hang out, and they hang out at this big dining room table. And I realized that day. I mean, that's enough. That was an amazing day because, again, we had no idea of the impact that we were having on him. And I say this to people. Sometimes, you give, and you kind of hope that you're going to see some kind of a return on it. And sometimes you don't, but it's not until many, many, many years later do you realize that you did, in fact, have this huge impact on another human being. You just didn't see it at the moment.
Sure. Yeah. So that day, he was turned on, if you will, by the human connection in that room, and you had plugged into the human connection with him because now he's dreaming. He's got a connection. You've made the connection. He started dreaming. I love it. That whole dynamic there is great. That's perfect.
And particularly today with so much technology, one of an invisible thread kindness pledge. One of the, we say take this pledge, and there are 10 different things that you can do. And one thing is to pass love and talk across the dining room table. For that hour in a day, put down your telephones, put down technology, don't text, and really sit down and have dinner together as a family. It's amazing the impact that it can have on a family, including the mom and the dad.
Sure. Yep. With undivided attention.
Yes.
Exactly right. Yeah, there's so much stuff grabbing at us today. That's a great point. Well, Miss Laura, we have come to the end of our show, the end of our time block.
Well, I can't thank you enough for reaching out to me, and honestly, it's such an honor and such a privilege to be on your show.
You don't know. The honor is all mine.
Well,
I love having you.
And what you're trying to do and what you're a kind voice on good news, there's so much bad news, so it's so nice to have the association and to be a part of your show, and I really, really appreciate it. I would like to say that if anybody would like to know more about my book, they can visit my website, which is aninvisibleThread.com, and they can really kind of get a sense of, what the book's been doing over the past 2 years, which is amazing. I can't believe it's 2 years.
Excellent. Well, you know what, Laura, I would love to be in touch with you sooner than later, and whether it's back on the show or you and I can just talk, I would love to be able to have the opportunity to talk with you again.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. And thank you so, so much.
You're welcome, and thank you so much again for being on the show, and we will talk with you very soon.
All right. Take care.
Oh, boy, there she goes, author of An Invisible Thread. What a book that is. That's a good read. You won't want to set it down. So we are at the end of our time. Thank you for tuning in to A Kind Voice on Good News. Good night.
Well, hello, fellow soldier. How's your day? Come take my arm. Let's walk and sink away. I want to know your thoughts now, yes, it's true. And that bluebird, he flew by now just for you. Step outside, you don't know who you'll meet. Feel the pitter-patter of the street. Join the crowd and sing in harmony. I won't let go, come link elbows with me.